Alright, I must know. Was Steve O'Donnell, like, awakened by the spirits of the racing gods in his sleep the previous couple nights? Because what the hell has happened? Of course, there has been a lot of negative publicity, a lot of negative press surrounding NASCAR throughout this playoff run. The playoff run with race manipulation, Ross Chastain's dive bomb move on Denny Hamlin, continuously ratings getting lower and lower. But there has been some rumors, some things going on about NASCAR finally making a curve, a change of lanes, a change of pace, whatever you want to call it. Is NASCAR finally listening to us? Now, whenever I say that, the first thing that's going to come from NASCAR fans is, Jack, come on, we've been through this before. We know that NASCAR, they're going to listen to us, but not really listen to us, which I understand, but hear me out. So Steve O'Donnell was on the Dale Jr. Download a couple days ago, and he made some very strong statements on three key parts of NASCAR. First off, the confirmation that NASCAR will be getting an increase of horsepower in 2026 from 670 to 750 on tracks that are smaller than 1.5 miles and road courses. Now, yes, it is only 80 horsepower, and according to other people like Tyler Reddick saying that you need 1,000 horsepower to get any real noticeable change, Kevin Harvick saying that he heard that drivers had done testing on the sim and that it made virtually no difference. Anything is a W. Anything is a win. And regardless, with a test session that's going to come at North Wilkesboro during the offseason, I believe in late December, early January, NASCAR with the opportunity to make some adjustments, because not only are they upping the horsepower, obviously you have to make some adjustments with how Goodyear creates a tire, maybe some aero changes. All in all, an effort to make the racing much better, and at least for the tracks that are shorter than 1.5 miles and road courses, to make it kind of like it was during the Gen 6 era, especially in the later half of the Gen 6 era. Now, why not go higher than that? Steve did say that it would cost the industry nearly $40 to $50 million to make such a change. However, Denny Hamlin on his podcast has mentioned multiple times that the engine bill had not changed since 2014, so why not just release the hounds? Why not just go unrestricted? Now, I understand both sides. I understand Denny Hamlin saying, listen, the engine bill hasn't changed in 10 years, regardless of you cutting horsepower, so what's the difference? I am no engineer by any means, so I don't know how long the engine life would be if you restricted from 750 compared to an unrestricted 900. I don't know how big of a difference that would be in terms of the life of a race engine. But you did have Doug Yates saying that if we were to go unrestricted 900 horsepower, that would be a real dramatic change on how we build an engine from start. Whereas 750 is considered the safest range while still upping the amount of horsepower without having to really change much. I mean, higher horsepower was actually considered according to NASCAR, so it seems as though coming from NASCAR side, they wanted to go higher, but considering everything going around, including looking at a new engine architecture, which hybrid has been a very key word that's been brought up in the NASCAR community about the future of NASCAR. But it is nice to see that, okay, at least as though it does sound like NASCAR does want to up the horsepower down the line. They just want to do it in a way that is still profitable or doesn't have them spending tens of millions of dollars. Which, okay, as a fan, I understand that. I hate that saying about money, 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 money. It should be all about trying to put on the best racing product. While at the same time, I understand from a business side of things. Another part that was very interesting was Dodge itself. We know that Ram is coming to the Truck Series next year, and that Dodge has gone up to NASCAR and be like, when can we put a Hemi in the engine? I mean, hell, that's been huge of Ram's marketing campaign around NASCAR, is that the Hemi is back. So of course, you have to assume that they would eventually want to bring a Hemi engine into the Cup Series really far down the line. Another thing that Steve O'Donnell brought up that was very striking is that he name dropped Honda by name about potential future OEMs joining NASCAR. Now, NASCAR and Honda had been going back and forth in terms of the rumor mill. Is Honda joining NASCAR? We know that there is very much uncertainty with Honda in the future in IndyCar, and there's growing possibility about them potentially switching from IndyCar to NASCAR down the line. Of course, it's a rumor, but that rumor is growing and growing by the year. So the future of NASCAR in terms of horsepower and OEMs does seem really good down the line. But again, this is words we're just hearing. I want to see some action now. Now, he brought up a lot of criticism with the next-gen car about how there's been very little changes of the next-gen car compared to what you saw in the COT era, 2007 to 2009, compared from 2010 to 2012, dramatically different. In the Gen 6 era, almost every year we saw some form of major rule change. Whereas with the next-gen car, it's been largely unchanged since 2022, despite some little modifications. But it does seem as though that NASCAR is open and wanting down the line to maybe go back to the days of the race race engineers and race teams kind of maybe building their own stuff. But to understand why the next gen car was created in the first place. According to team owners, it was becoming a losing battle. It was becoming an arms race. The teams were spending so much money and not getting very little in return. They went to NASCAR as a way of saying, listen, NASCAR, you have to save us from ourselves or else we're going to drown in this business. And so that's when the creation of the next gen car was a collaboration with NASCAR and the teams to basically create a spec car to at least somewhat help with the cost savings. Now, depending on who you talk to, if you do talk to Team Penske or Hendrick Motorsports, it has helped costs, whereas if you look at maybe 2311, for example, they're saying it hasn't helped costs. It's just gotten even more expensive. Depending on who you talk to, it has maybe at the very least, it helped improved in some capacity. I mean, we are starting to see now new teams come up to light like Trackhouse and 2311 Racing, who came into NASCAR because of the next gen car. And we're seeing teams like Spire Motorsports that are starting to build now and get better and better in terms of performance. Basically, since the start of the next gen car, they've started to build on their performance. I mean, yes, it is still Penske, Gibbs, and Hendrick. That is still the big three. I mean, hell, look at the playoffs, the round of 8. It is just those 3 teams. But Steve O'Donnell mentioned the trust between the competition and NASCAR themselves has gotten a lot better over the years. I mean, there was that thing going around about the All-Star race about NASCAR going to the teams and saying, hey, build what you want to build. Obviously, that didn't work because of time constraints. The team said no to that because there's so little time. But that does tell me one thing, that NASCAR is open to the idea of allowing some flexibility with the race teams on them maybe building their own stuff once again. The engineering part of NASCAR, that makes it even more interesting, seeing the littlest of things that could create such a big difference, and not so much of what we see nowadays is just a maybe change of air pressure, maybe a change of shock springs and things of that nature. We want to go back to the days of seeing more of a difference of a Hendrick car or Hendrick Chevrolet compared to a Spire Chevrolet, or the difference between a Joe Gibbs Toyota and a 2311 Toyota. And that they are open down the line to having teams and OEMs create their own IPs to create such a difference, which I think will help improve the racing a lot, since there is a difference and not everyone is basically running the same car and running the same speed. And finally, playoffs. I mentioned this in yesterday's video, the issues with the playoffs in terms of race manipulation and what drivers are willing to do, throw caution to the wind, and we're starting to see an uptick in reckless driving happen as a result of the playoffs. Well, Steve O'Donnell mentioned some very, very interesting points that I think me and a lot of y'all have been wanting to hear. And to hear it from an executive is very big. We know that the growing possibility of a full season points format gets bigger and bigger. I don't know about the chances of it happening. I don't know how good they are. Still probably very low, but the growing discussion of it gets more and more every single week, it seems. Now, here's some things that Steve O'Donnell mentioned that I agree with and have been saying, is that the playoffs at this current iteration hurts star power. And that's one thing I've been saying a lot. It does hurt star power when you have maybe random champions is the wrong word, but it does hurt star power when you're having every year a different championship in a format that creates so much parity. It's hard for the stars to really elevate. Another thing he says that he doesn't like it when people who win the Daytona 500 automatically say we're in the playoffs. That's something that Dale Jr. mentioned when he won it back in 2014, when he says we're in the playoffs.
We pretty much might be in the chase. Ain't gonna worry about that.
That is a great point. I'd even think about myself, specifically like with the Daytona 500. The first thing should be, we just won the Daytona 500, not, oh, we're in the playoffs. It dilutes the star of the Daytona 500. It dilutes the importance of that event. One way to get rid of that is to not have a win and you're in format. That is the only way to get rid of drivers saying that. He said that NASCAR needs the drivers to buy into whatever they're trying to sell as a champion. We know that Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, and I believe Chase Elliott have all said that they would prefer a full season points format, while other drivers, except for maybe Joey Logano, don't really care. Not to mention, you also have former drivers like Dale Jr., Mark Marr, and a lot of other former drivers have all side with the full season points format, or at the very least, maybe the chase at least a program or a format that creates more consistency and creates a simpler way of crowning a champion. And finally, he also said something that I feel like is a much bigger thing that we need to discuss. And I think I would arguably say it is the most important thing that Steve O'Donnell mentioned about the playoffs. He says that NASCAR cannot have a format in place to bring in new fans at the expense of its existing fans, and that NASCAR fans are not football fans, or football fans are not like NASCAR fans. That line right there is super important because that has been NASCAR's motto since 2004, to be like football, be like other sports, to even down their schedule, how they determine their schedule. Steve O'Donnell mentioned that as well, that they left the tracks to try and go into these bigger, higher markets, like in Southern California, Fontana, Las Vegas, Fort Worth. They went to these big markets and left the tracks that got them there in the first place. That's why going to North Wilkesboro, it was so important. That's why going to Bowman Gray is so special. He mentioned that how, yes, it is okay to go to San Diego. It's okay to go to Mexico, potentially Canada, wherever. It's okay to go to these new markets. But if you are going to those new markets, don't abandon the tracks. He mentioned that, and I feel like that's a very, very important thing for an executive of Steve O'Donnell, the president of NASCAR, that's extremely important for him to say. For him to say that NASCAR fans are not like football fans, and that it is not good for NASCAR to focus on new fans while at the expense of leaving its existence fan base, that is such an important thing for him to say. Because again, for the last 20 years, NASCAR has been doing nothing but trying to relate to stick and ball sports, to relate to football. NASCAR went from a big fish in a small pond to a very small fish in a massive freaking pond. Him saying that they need to go back to their roots, that they have to stop trying to be all things to all people, in a sense, trying to be like everybody else. Instead, be who we are. We are NASCAR. We're not football. Let's stop trying to be that. Let's stop trying to cater to everyone. Stop trying to cater to all stick and ball sports, because sorry, but a football fan probably more likely is not going to want to be a racing fan in general, not just a NASCAR fan. If they are, great, but don't try and change your entire personality to fit that person. A stupid comparison is like you trying to change your whole personality in high school so that the most popular girl likes you, when more than likely the most popular girl is still not even gonna look at you, and at the same time the people that do like you for who you are abandon you because they know that you're fake, see-through, and that you are not who they liked in the first place, and so they leave you. So you lose in both ways. That's kind of like what he's saying right there. Now the big question is, do I believe him? I don't know. I will say this. We've had Steve Phelps also on the Daily Junior Download multiple times. This was probably the damnedest interview I've seen from an executive that talks to Dale Jr. or that talks to the media in general about their outlook in NASCAR. In the past, we've always heard from the State of the Sport address or from other things involving long interviews with NASCAR executives. They give out very PC answers that doesn't really tell you much. It may sound good, but doesn't really tell you exactly fully what they're saying, and you kind of leave it feeling, okay, I guess he's alright. But I must say, for all of my issues I have with O'Donnell, and I have some issues with him, this was probably the first time I left an interview from an executive feeling, okay, I like what I'm hearing. This is good. This is good. I'm not fully on board because I had to see it to believe it, but from what he's saying and how he's saying it marks the first time in a long time where I left an interview feeling, okay, I got there's some hope here. I feel like they are doing what they're saying they are going to do. I hope I'm right. I hope we stay on this path. I hope I'm not wrong, and I hope I'm not being scammed, fooled, or bamboozled. I have a feeling that NASCAR maybe is fixing what we've been saying. I don't know. I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to get my hopes up, but could we be right? Maybe.